My name's Graham Walker, I'm digital editor at the Star in Sheffield, and here I am in Ilkley tonight for a very special reason with Steve Tompkinson. Hello Steve, how are you?
I'm very well, it's lovely to meet you.
And you don't look like you've changed after 20 years since Brassed Off.
You're very kind. Well, I know I have, but it doesn't feel like 20 years. No. Not at all, but you know, you do various projects and you hope they'll be successful. Not in your wildest dreams do you ever think there'll be a demand for it 2 decades later. And it just goes to show what an amazingly beautiful, heartwarming, human story Mark Herman, who wrote and directed it, wanted to tell.
Well, you know what, you're best known these days obviously by a generation for the likes of DCI Banks and for Wild at Heart and for sailing balloons over Australia and doing all kinds of things. But what does Brassed Off mean to you as a career landmark?
Brassed Off was my first film. It was a story that was very close to my heart. When I first came to London to drama school between 1984 and 1987, when I first arrived there were still miners on the street with the coal knock dole stickers and the buckets, and I got myself elected to the student union quite early on because I was about the only northerner in my year, and a lot of my fellow classmates didn't know why these miners were striking, didn't know anything about the miners. So I went to 2 lads who were collecting buckets on the Finchley Road in London and asked if they wouldn't mind coming in one evening about 6 o'clock to educate us about their struggle, about what it was all about. And we had about 350 students stay behind who knew very little about working conditions, you know, and couldn't get their head around why you would want to keep pits open when it was so awful. But when they explained it was generation after generation, the fact that they weren't asking for the world and it was your elected representatives who had seemed to turn on you, who were dismantling your industry, it was a massive eye-opener to everyone. You know, there was no side to these 2 lads who came to speak. And, you know, when Mark's script came along and I knew it wasn't a sort of Hollywood version, you know, that it wasn't a pit that was going to close with huge explosions or car chases. It was an honest story where the big entertainment angle was brass band music, which may not be that popular with people, but Mark, I think that was Mark's point. That sound, being near that sound, is so unique and so representative of each colliery and each community, and as a whole, so uniquely British. It was a story that had to be told. We had no big budget whatsoever. Consequently, we kind of went under the radar. There was no editing in there about the political standpoint that we chose. We didn't feel we could choose any other political standpoint. These people felt betrayed, and it was their voice, it was their story, it was never tampered down, and we had no big budget for advertising, but slowly it just became this word of mouth film. People just said, you have to see this film, it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, it'll open your eyes, it'll open your... And it grew and it grew, and it stayed in the top 10 for about 11 weeks, which is unheard of for a little British film, and it was competing with all the blockbusters that were coming out around November, Christmas time, and just held its own and stayed in 2 West End cinemas for 4.5 months. And in fact, we had to go up to the Odeon in Doncaster, who were still packing audiences out 26 weeks later with the film. We had to ask them to stop showing it because it was going to clash with the video release. So we took the replica trophy of the brass band that we used in the film and presented it to them because it just became this people's film. And still is. 20 years later, there's still a big audience down there watching it.
You didn't just make a film, you documented a period of time, didn't you?
Yeah.
Do you feel that? It's almost documentary?
It was a piece of social history. A lot of MPs have commented of it being a shameful episode in Britain's social history. Cardinal Basil Hume, who was the head of the Catholic Church at the time, went as far as to say Mrs. Thatcher was evil, what she did to communities, and how systematic it was, and with malice aforethought almost, destroyed communities.
You obviously had a good understanding of the community before you made it, but obviously setting grimly but really filmed in Grimethorpe with its brass band. How much did you learn about the real struggle of the village coping with the loss of the pit while you were making that film?
We learned everything from the people we met. I was lucky that the first ever TV series I did was with Pete Postlethwaite. I think he maybe had a hand in recommending me to play his son in the film, even though it was my first ever cinema film. But Mark took a gamble on me, and before we started filming, Pete and I went down to Grimethorpe for about 10 days to meet everyone that we could, to try to get the accent as near perfect as we could, to let them read the script, to know that it was their story, that we weren't trying to embellish it in any way, that we just wanted to tell the truth. And they saw that, they accepted us, they opened up to us in a way that was indispensable to us, as was the way that the Grimethorpe Colliery Band welcomed in these strange actors who were picking up. We tried our best to make it as real as we could, because it's their story. It's not about us. It's about them, and we wanted to represent them. They're still playing now loud and proud, and we're proud to be a little chapter in their history.
I get the feeling from you that it's probably your proudest piece of work.
Definitely. I said to Pete at the time, Robert Redford, of all people, asked us to open his Sundance Film Festival with Brastoff. So I knew it mattered, and I said to Pete when after that screening there, and we'd just had a drink with Robert Redford, I said it's odd to think at 31 this could be the highlight of my career, and Pete understood completely. He said, it won't be, you mustn't think like that. He said, but I know what you mean. And
how do you feel today about that? Looking back, you've had a great career so far.
Yeah.
Is it going to be difficult to beat?
I think so, because I know that this has had a genuine effect on people, and still is. You know, there'll be people watching that now who'll be looking for hankies surreptitiously and rejoicing at the same time.
I have to ask you about that. Every time I hear the music, indeed, any brass band music, it's spine-tingling.
It does.
And when I watch the movie, I can never watch it without a tear in my eye. What about you?
I'm hopeless. I mean, the first time we got together as a cast was to go to the world famous Abbey Road studios to watch the band record the soundtrack, and they did Danny Boy, which I thought at reading, this seems a bit too on the nose, might even possibly be a bit gratuitous, but they did it, and Pete's character's called that. None of us could look at each other. We're all gone.
Well, technically you were Danny's boy, weren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Playing Phil in
yeah.
And we all remember you, obviously, as Coco the Scab.
Yeah.
I mean, what a tragic character that was.
Yes, I mean, in the great history of clowns that cry, Mark wanted to put that, and that was the only bit that wasn't scripted. When you saw Phil do his atrocious attempt to entertain the kids, we improvised the whole lot, the bad card tricks, the watch getting smashed up, because Mark wanted me to find my own tragedy, find my own sad clown, and he did. He let me loose on that, and so it did become a lot more personal, because it was something I'd created. And I also think it was the one bizarre splash of colour in the whole thing, but again so sad, but he never allowed it to spill over into sentimentality or mawkishness. Even after his attempted suicide, his trolley goes past and you see those huge clown shoes, which always just whips the rug away from people and lets them know they're allowed to laugh again.
But you seem to almost show both sides of your career as well, because we've had all the Drop the Dead Donkey, we've had the Trolley, but then we've had the serious side of DCI bands.
Yeah.
It kind of told us early on, didn't it, that you were very versatile?
Well, I couldn't believe that I wasn't going through an enormous audition process. I never had to read for it. I thought there would be a massive queue of people with far greater experience than I at the time. I didn't. Mark had seen something, because when I went to meet him, I assumed, because of where I was in my career, and I'd only really been known for Drop the Dead Donkey at the time, that it was the part of Andy that I was going to read for, the part that you, and he went, no, Ewan McGregor's doing that. And I knew Ewan, you know, was big because he'd had the series on TV and he'd already filmed Trainspotting. So, well, I couldn't remember. I thought, oh, maybe it's the Simo character that plays pool with him, because that would have felt about right. And he went, no, it's Phil. And I was like, but in many ways this character crosses over. He went, yes. And as he was saying this, I felt myself going a bit faint, and I ended up with my head on the desk going, are you sure? Are you sure you want me to do it? And you don't? Yeah. If you want to do it, I want you to do it. I couldn't believe my luck.
They come along probably once in a lifetime.
Exactly. And I knew Pete before, so that was a great help. And I'd met Phil Jackson before, but we all bonded together so much. I mean, when we filmed the last scene, I was inconsolable. Absolutely, I couldn't believe.
We see tears in your eyes on screen. Are they real?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely real. And some of the last scenes that we filmed, which was in Birmingham Town Hall, that we tried to make look like the Albert Hall. When they called the final cut on the whole thing, I was gone for about half an hour, and it was Jim Carter who sort of picked me up and said, I have been so proud to watch you during the filming of this, and you should stand up now. And so he snapped me out of it.
Do you know what, Steve? A lot's changed in the former Pit Village. Obviously, times have changed. We're 20 years on. The band is still there, thank goodness. It's almost like the scripts continue, and there's the story of the families from 20 years ago to now. Isn't there another film in this?
Well, yeah, Mark was always sort of thinking about, at the time, I wonder where it'll all be in 20 years' time. But that would have to be his decision. And
would you be interested?
He knows we'd all be there in a heartbeat if it were possible.
So all us diehard Brass fans, we think we could still see a sequel?
Oh, I'd love to do one. And as you say, there's still stories to be told. I still want the band to keep going. I know it's very difficult for them, and they need sponsorship, and a lot of the bands that are still going rely heavily on things like that. And I would like, and I'm trying to campaign with people that are interested to maybe get a Royal Society of brass bands, an umbrella that could protect them, because it is so uniquely British.
Well, we're going to ask you about that because it's 100 years old next year.
Yes.
And I know that they lost their main sponsor, but I think there's something now called Donate, a national funding scheme, that's keeping them going. What would you say directly to fans of brass band music to put your hands in your pockets and also go see this band and make sure? Well,
it's not individuals, it is sponsorship that it needs, and I want to go as far as to try to get an audience with someone like Prince Charles, who could make a Royal Society of brass bands, that people that are, been established for 100 years should automatically be given, because they are still playing, they are still entertaining crowds. And something like a Royal, you are a member of the Royal Society of Brass Bands, would be better protection to help them gain sponsorship.
In terms of Grimethorpe as it is now, have you been back since? Have you kept in touch with anybody from Barnsley?
Well, with the courtesy of the irrepressible Mel Dyke, still in touch. With the cast are still in touch, and Mel keeps us updated, and there's various MPs, Michael Duggar, I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and we want to keep fighting. Yeah, absolutely.
This is all genuine stuff, isn't it? This was life-changing experience.
Totally. And they mean the world to me, and I would hate to think that there was no more Grimethorpe Colliery Band, or any colliery band for that matter.
I want to just, I've mentioned Ewan McGregor and Tara Fitzgerald and the late great Pete Postlethwaite, but what were they like as individuals and to work with, particularly on this film?
Just gorgeous. We all bonded around Mark's script, and then getting to meet the band, getting to meet the community in Grimethorpe. You know, you felt you were representative of something a lot bigger than you, so all egos went out the window. It was a concerted team effort to tell this story, which was their story.
And do you know what, in terms of the location, I think a lot of people tend to think you're a Yorkshireman anyway, but I think you're actually an adopted Yorkshireman now. You're an honorary Yorkshireman.
Yes, indeed. I did live in East Ayton outside Scarborough for a couple of years, because my dad worked all his life for the Yorkshire Bank. So yeah, if I can't be an adopted son of a son of the Yorkshire Bank, Dad worked all his life for them.
But I think Gary Verity actually gave
you the badge. He gave me the badge, which I haven't got with me, isn't that awful?
Yeah.
But yeah, Gary very kindly, when I met him at the Royal Albert Hall for my other dear friend and writer Tim Firth.
And what does that mean to you?
Everything. I've just spent this weekend up in Filey, because it's half term. I've been introducing my daughter Daisy, who's 15, to Filey and Scarborough and Whitby and Robin Hood's Bay, because it's, I think, the most beautiful coastline the country has to offer.
And while I've got you in front of me, I've got to say, you've obviously been back in Leeds filming DCI Banks. I mean, how good is that, and have we got more to come?
Yeah, well, we start filming a new series on Monday, so this will be the 6th year we've been up here, and Peter Robinson's still writing the story, so fingers crossed. Yeah.
Are you enjoying Leeds? Do you like the place?
I adore it. Absolutely adore it. It's gone through the best transformation of any city, the way it's been redeveloped. It's a joy to be around.
And what next for you, Stephen? I mean, I heard at one point you wanted to play Richard III on stage.
Oh, I'd love to. I love a smiling villain. That'd be great. But anything, I'm happy working.
And what else are we going to see? Have we got any other plans, any other TV work coming up?
Well, this new series of Banks that will be on in the autumn, and hopefully Trolleyed will go again, and I'm up for offers.
Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.